He disowned his son for marrying a poor girl, only to discover her DNA test showed she was royalty. A father's pride tore his family apart, leaving a young couple to start their life in the shadow of rejection. But when a single test uncovers a hidden bloodline, everything changes. Suddenly, the girl he called unworthy is seen as greater than anyone imagined. The truth shakes the family, the community, and the man who thought he had all the answers. But can pride survive when love, forgiveness, and destiny collide? Or will it destroy the family forever?
Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today.
Colonel Charles Whitmore polished the brass metal with meticulous precision, moving the cloth in small, deliberate circles. The afternoon sunlight slanted through the study windows, catching the oak paneling and giving the room a warm glow that belied the tension hanging in the air. "May I speak with you, Father?" Michael stood in the doorway, his shoulders square but his fingers fidgeting with the edge of his jacket. Charles didn't look up. "Of course. Hand me that cloth, would you?" Michael crossed the room, the floorboards creaking beneath his careful steps. He passed the fresh polishing cloth to his father and cleared his throat. "I've made a decision that I hope will make you proud." Michael took a deep breath. "I've asked Anna to marry me." The polishing cloth froze mid-circle. Charles's weathered face remained perfectly still, only his eyes lifting to meet his son's. "The librarian?" The words carried the weight of judgment. "Yes, sir. I love her." Charles placed the medal carefully on the velvet display case and rose from his chair. He was still an imposing figure at 70 tall, straight-backed, with a military bearing that had never softened with retirement. Love. He turned the word over like a foreign object. You want to marry a penniless orphan because of love. She's kind and intelligent, and she's nobody. Charles walked to the window, clasping his hands behind his back. "The Whitmores have maintained a certain position in this community for generations. Your mother and I didn't work our entire lives, so you could throw away your future on some girl from nowhere." Michael's face flushed. "Anna has more character in her little finger than most people I know. She was raised in foster homes but put herself through college. She works with children and volunteers. Spare me the charity case details." Charles turned, his expression hardening. "What can she bring to this family? No connections, no dowry, not even a respectable bloodline to speak of. Those things don't matter anymore. This isn't the 19th century. Values matter. Heritage matters." Charles's voice rose. "I will not have the Whitmore name attached to some nameless nobody." Michael straightened, something in him hardening. "Her name is Anna, and she'll be a Whitmore too. Not with my blessing. I'm not asking for your blessing. I'm informing you of my decision." Charles slammed his palm against the desk. "You ungrateful boy. After everything we've provided the education, the opportunities, you throw it all away for this. This library girl, I love her. We're getting married in June. Then you make your choice clear." Charles's voice dropped dangerously low. "If you marry her, you are no longer my son. No position in my business, no inheritance, no place in this house." The silence stretched between them, heavy with decades of expectation. Michael looked around the study at the family photographs, the military honors, the leather-bound books, all symbols of the legacy his father treasured above all else. For a moment, his expression wavered. Then he looked directly into his father's eyes. "I'm sorry you feel that way." He turned and walked toward the door, each step more certain than the last. "If you walk out that door, don't expect to be welcomed back," Charles called after him. Michael paused in the doorway, his hand on the frame. "I hope one day you'll meet the real Anna, not just the poor girl you've invented in your mind." The door closed quietly behind him, the sound of it more devastating than if he had slammed it. St. Andrew's Chapel glowed with warm light as the wedding party gathered for the rehearsal. Stained glass windows caught the last rays of evening sun, casting colorful patterns across the worn wooden pews. Laughter echoed against the stone walls as Michael's friends clustered near the altar. Anna stood at the back of the sanctuary, her simple blue dress a stark contrast to the elaborate floral arrangements lining the aisle. She twisted a strand of hair around her finger, watching Michael chat with Pastor Williams. "You look beautiful." Mrs. Jenkins, Anna's former foster mother, squeezed her hand. The older woman's eyes crinkled with pride. "I always knew you'd find happiness." Anna's smile wobbled. "I just wish everyone felt that way." "Michael loves you. That's what matters." Mrs. Jenkins straightened Anna's collar. "The rest will work itself out in time." Pastor Williams clapped his hands. "Let's get started, shall we? Places, everyone." The small group assembled. Michael's college roommate took his position as best man. Two of Anna's friends from the library arranged themselves as bridesmaids. The pianist began a gentle melody. Anna took a deep breath and stepped forward. Michael turned, his face lighting up at the sight of her. For a moment, everything was perfect. The chapel doors crashed open. Colonel Charles Whitmore stood in the doorway, his face thunderous. Silence fell immediately. "Father," Michael said, voice steady despite the shock. "We didn't expect you." Charles marched down the aisle, each footstep echoing against the stone floor. "I came to see if you'd reconsidered this foolishness." Anna froze midway down the aisle, her hands trembling. Michael moved to her side. "This isn't the time or place. On the contrary," Charles's voice carried to every corner of the chapel, "this is precisely the time before you make a terrible mistake." Mrs. Jenkins stepped forward. "Colonel Whitmore, perhaps we could discuss this privately." "I have nothing to say to you." Charles dismissed her with a glance before turning back to his son. "I built everything we have from nothing. 30 years in service to this country. A business respected throughout the state. A name that means something. Dad, please. And you would throw it all away." Charles's gaze shifted to Anna, who stood straighter under his scrutiny. For her, the chapel fell utterly silent. Someone coughed nervously. "Her name is Anna," Michael said, his voice tight, "and she'll be my wife tomorrow whether you approve or not." Charles's face darkened. "Then I have only one thing left to say." He looked around at the gathered witnesses, as if ensuring they would all hear his declaration. "From this moment forward, you are no longer my son. You will receive nothing from me. Not my name, not my business, not a penny of what I've built." Gasps rippled through the small crowd. The pianist's hands flew to her mouth. Charles turned to Anna, his eyes cold. "The Whitmore name has stood for dignity and honor for generations. You are unworthy to bear it." Anna's face paled, but she lifted her chin. "I'm marrying Michael because I love him, not because of his name. So be it." Charles turned on his heel and strode toward the door. At the threshold, he paused and looked back. "When this ends in tears, don't come crawling back." The heavy door slammed behind him, leaving stunned silence. Michael turned to Anna, taking both her hands in his. "I'm so sorry." Anna squeezed his fingers, tears shimmering in her eyes, but her voice steady. "Are you still sure about tomorrow?" "More than ever." They walked hand in hand down the aisle, past the shocked faces of their friends, into the cool evening air. Behind them, whispers erupted like autumn leaves in the wind, but neither looked back. Morning brought a chilly drizzle that tapped against the chapel windows like hesitant fingers. Inside, a single arrangement of wildflowers adorned the altar, their colors vivid against the somber stone walls. Anna stood in the small side room, adjusting the simple lace veil Mrs. Jenkins had worn at her own wedding decades ago. The older woman fussed with the folds of Anna's cream-colored dress borrowed, not bought, smoothing invisible wrinkles. Something borrowed, something blue. Mrs. Jenkins pinned a small sapphire brooch to Anna's collar. "My mother wore this when she married. Now it's your turn." Anna caught her reflection in the spotted mirror. Her face looked paler than usual, but her eyes shone with quiet determination. "I wish there were more people here to see how beautiful you look." Anna touched Mrs. Jenkins's hand. "The right people are here." Outside, the church bell chimed 11. Through the cracked door, Anna watched as Michael and his best friend Tom took their places at the altar. The gathering was small, just 8 people counting the pastor, where yesterday's rehearsal had filled the first 3 rows. Pastor Williams nodded to the pianist, a kind-faced woman who'd volunteered when the hired musician canceled last minute. The first notes of the wedding march floated through the sanctuary, somehow more poignant for being slightly off-key. Mrs. Jenkins offered her arm. "Ready, sweetheart?" Anna nodded. Together they stepped into the aisle. Michael turned, and the naked adoration on his face scattered Anna's nervousness like leaves in wind. His eyes never left hers as she walked toward him, past empty pews that should have held family. "Dearly beloved," Pastor Williams began, his voice warm against the drumming rain, "we gather in God's presence to witness the union of 2 faithful hearts." The ceremony unfolded simply. No lengthy readings or elaborate candle rituals, just ancient vows spoken in clear voices that echoed in the half-empty church. "With this ring, I, thee, Wednesday." Michael's fingers trembled slightly as he slipped the thin gold band onto Anna's finger. It had been his grandmother's, removed from the family safe before Charles could stop him. When they kissed, their small audience broke into applause that seemed to chase away the hollow echoes of the sanctuary. The rain paused briefly as they stepped outside. Mrs. Jenkins threw a handful of rice that scattered across the wet stone steps. "God bless this union," Pastor Williams said, shaking Michael's hand firmly. Tom approached with keys dangling from his fingers. "Wedding present borrowed, not stolen. My car's yours for the week." The blue sedan waited at the curb, decorated with a single ribbon tied to the antenna. Michael opened the passenger door for Anna, then jogged around to the driver's side. As they pulled away from the curb, Anna glanced back at their friends, waving from the church steps. The rain began again, softer now, misting the windows. "Thank you," she whispered, once they'd turned the corner. Michael glanced over. "For what?" "For choosing me." Anna's fingers twisted her new ring. "Even when it cost you so much." Michael reached across the console to take her hand. "I didn't lose anything that matters." But his eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, back toward the empty space where his father should have stood. Anna squeezed his fingers, feeling the weight of absence settle between them like an uninvited guest. They drove in silence, through streets slick with rain, heading toward a future neither had imagined just months before together, but carrying the shadow of what was missing. The small rental house on Mulberry Lane sat at the edge of town where pavement gave way to gravel. A modest porch with peeling white paint and a squeaky front step welcomed Michael and Anna as they carried the first of their boxes inside. "Home sweet home," Michael announced, setting down a crate labeled "Kitchen" in black marker. Sunlight streamed through dusty windows, casting golden squares across the worn hardwood floor. Anna spun slowly in the empty living room. "It's perfect." Perfect might have been a stretch. The wallpaper bubbled slightly near the ceiling, and a suspicious water stain marked one corner. But the rent fit their budget, and the landlord had allowed them to paint if they wished. "Your castle awaits, Mrs. Whitmore." Michael bowed dramatically, making Anna laugh. Tom's pickup truck rumbled in the driveway, loaded with furniture, most of it donated by friends or purchased secondhand. For the next 3 hours, they unloaded beds, bookshelves, and a sagging couch that required both men to navigate through the narrow doorway. By late afternoon, Anna unpacked dishes in the kitchen while Michael assembled a wobbly coffee table. She unwrapped newspapers from around a blue plate that didn't match anything else they owned. "The mismatched collection, I'm calling it." Anna held up the plate alongside a floral teacup. No two pieces alike, very avant-garde. Michael looked up from his screwdriver. "Like us. Exactly like us." She placed the dishes on an open shelf. Different backgrounds, perfect together. The mention of backgrounds hung in the air between them. Anna quickly changed the subject. "Mrs. Jenkins sent us that quilt on the couch. Said it would warm our new nest." Michael laughed. "Did she actually say nest?" Her exact words. Anna mimicked her foster mother's tone. "Every nest needs something handmade with love." The afternoon faded into evening. They ordered pizza when hunger finally caught up to their efforts. Sitting cross-legged on the floor, they ate directly from the box. Paper plates deemed unnecessary. "To our first meal in our first home." Michael raised a slice in toast. Anna clinked her pizza against his. "May it be the first of many." Later, unpacking books, Anna discovered Michael's childhood photo album tucked between novels. She hesitated before opening it. Photos of a younger Michael filled the pages, fishing with his father, graduating high school, family Christmas mornings. Charles Whitmore appeared frequently, his arm around his son's shoulders, pride evident in his stance. Michael found her there, fingers tracing a family portrait. "He wasn't always so rigid," he said softly, sitting beside her. "After Mom died, something changed. Like he needed to control everything to prevent more loss." Anna closed the album gently. "I hope he finds his way back to you." The evening wound down with the unpacking still half finished. Exhausted, they made their way to the bedroom where a mattress sat on a metal frame, another second-hand purchase. Michael flopped down dramatically. 5-star accommodations. The mattress squeaked loudly in protest. Anna collapsed beside him, giggling as every movement produced a symphony of springs. "We'll need to oil this thing, or the neighbors will think scandalous thoughts." They changed into pajamas, brushed teeth at the bathroom sink that dripped steadily, and settled under blankets that smelled faintly of thrift store. In the darkness, the mattress protested each time they moved. Anna curled against Michael's side, listening to his breathing slow into sleep. The unfamiliar ceiling above held shadows she couldn't yet interpret. "God," she whispered, her prayer barely audible, "thank you for this home, for Michael, and please, if it's your will, heal the rift between father and son. Soften Charles's heart. Help him see beyond what he thinks he lost to what he still has." The mattress squeaked as she shifted closer to Michael's warmth, her eyes closing as sleep finally claimed her in their imperfect, perfect first home. Anna wiped down the kitchen counter, humming along to the radio playing softly in the background. 2 weeks in their new home, and she'd already established little routines that made the modest house feel like theirs. The doorbell's shrill ring interrupted her thoughts. Martha Jenkins stood on the porch, a gift bag dangling from her weathered hand. Her silver hair caught the afternoon sunlight as she beamed at Anna. "There's my girl. Thought I'd drop by and see how you lovebirds are settling in." Anna embraced her foster mother, breathing in the familiar scent of lavender soap. "Martha, come in, please. I just made fresh coffee." Martha bustled inside, her keen eyes taking in every detail of the small living room. "You've worked miracles with this place already." She ran a finger appreciatively over the bookshelf Michael had painted. Much homier than when the Peterson boy rented it. They settled at the kitchen table with steaming mugs. Martha placed the gift bag between them, a mysterious smile playing on her lips. A belated wedding present. Been saving up for something special. Anna reached for the bag. "You already gave us that beautiful quilt. That was practical. This island, something else entirely." Inside the bag, Anna found a colorful box with "Discover Your Roots" emblazoned across the top. An Ancestry DNA kit. "Oh." Anna turned the box over in her hands. "I've seen commercials for these." Martha leaned forward, eyes bright with excitement. "Thought it might help answer some questions you've had your whole life." Her voice softened. "About where you come from." Anna's fingers traced the edge of the box. Growing up in foster care, bouncing between homes until landing with Martha at 14, she'd learned to push away questions about her biological family. Those questions led nowhere but heartache. "I don't know, Martha." Anna set the box on the table. "What if there's nothing to find?" "Then you're no worse off than before." Martha covered Anna's hand with her own. "But what if there's something wonderful waiting to be discovered? Cousins you never knew, a family medical history?" Anna stared at the colorful packaging. The possibility of answers tugged at her heart despite her hesitation. "Michael always says I should embrace the unknown." Martha chuckled. "Smart man you married. Unlike his father." She caught herself. "Sorry, dear. That just slipped out." "It's okay." Anna smiled sadly. "We're praying for him." They chatted about neighborhood gossip until Martha glanced at her watch and declared she needed to get home before her afternoon programs. At the door, she hugged Anna tightly. "Just think about it. Sometimes knowing where you've been helps you see where you're going." After Martha left, Anna opened the kit on the kitchen table. The instructions seemed simple enough: a cheek swab. Seal it in the provided tube, mail it back. 6 to 8 weeks later, results would arrive by email. That evening, when Michael came home from work, she showed him the kit. "Martha thinks I might find long-lost relatives." She laughed lightly. "Imagine discovering I'm related to someone famous." Michael kissed her forehead. "Or infamous. What if you're descended from pirates? I'd make you walk the plank for leaving your socks on the floor." The next morning, Anna followed the instructions, sealing her DNA sample in the tube. On her way to work at the library, she dropped the small package in the mailbox outside the post office. "Well, that's that," she murmured, watching the envelope disappear into the slot. She chuckled at herself for feeling oddly ceremonious about such a small act. With a shrug, she continued down the sidewalk, mentally reviewing her tasks for the day. The ancestry test receded from her thoughts, becoming just another item checked off her to-do list. She had no way of knowing that in 6 weeks' time, that small sample would upend everything she thought she knew about herself. Anna sat at the kitchen table 1 month later, a half-eaten piece of toast forgotten beside her laptop. Morning sunlight streamed through the curtains as she scrolled through email's library newsletter reminders, a note from Martha about Sunday dinner, and a furniture sale flyer. Her cursor hovered over an unread message with the subject line, "Your ancestry results are ready." Already? Anna glanced at the calendar on the wall. The weeks had flown by, filled with settling into their new routine. She'd almost forgotten about the test. She clicked the email and tapped her fingers against the table as the page loaded. A colorful pie chart appeared, breaking down her genetic heritage by region. Her heart picked up speed as she scanned the results. 42% Northern European, 20% Eastern European, she murmured, leaning closer to the screen. Nothing particularly surprising there. But as she scrolled down, a notification box caught her eye. "We've detected a rare genetic marker in your DNA sample. Click here for additional information." Anna's finger hesitated over the trackpad. Something about the wording made her pulse quicken. She clicked. A new page loaded, featuring an ornate family crest she didn't recognize. Bold text announced, "Potential royal lineage match." What on earth? Anna blinked, certain she'd misread, but the words remained unchanged. The screen explained that her DNA contained markers matching those of the Corvinian royal family, a lesser-known European monarchy whose main line was believed to have died out in the 1940s. According to the information, Anna potentially descended from Princess Elisa Corvinia, who had disappeared during World War II. This has to be a mistake. Anna scrolled faster, looking for some disclaimer or explanation. Instead, she found a confidence rating of 98.7% and links to historical archives documenting the lost princess's story. Photographs showed a solemn young woman with high cheekbones and a delicate chin that looked eerily like Anna's own. She pushed back from the table, her breakfast completely forgotten. Outside, a neighbor's dog barked, grounding her momentarily in the ordinary world that suddenly felt less solid than before. With trembling fingers, Anna pulled up another browser tab and searched for Corvinia royal family. Links appeared: academic articles, history websites, even tourism pages for a small European country she'd barely heard of. She clicked on an encyclopedia entry and found herself staring at a formal portrait of the royal family from 1939. The young princess in the corner had Anna's eyes the unusual shade of green that Martha had always called cat's eyes. Anna's throat tightened. She'd spent her childhood making up stories about her birth parents. They were traveling musicians or maybe secret agents. Never once had she imagined anything like this. The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the silence. She scrolled through more information, finding mentions of a substantial estate still held in trust and official representatives who maintained royal traditions despite the absence of known heirs. Her phone buzzed with a text from Michael. "How's your morning, beautiful?" She stared at the message, unable to form a reply. How could she possibly explain this through text? Outside, a car honked. The neighbor called to his dog. Inside, Anna sat frozen before the screen that claimed she was the descendant of royalty. She closed her eyes, opened them again. The information remained unchanged. "That can't be real," she whispered, her voice barely audible in the quiet kitchen. But the evidence stared back at her, as real as the table beneath her fingertips. Michael's key rattled in the lock just after 5. The front door swung open, and he stepped into an unusual silence. No music played from the radio Anna usually kept on. No smell of dinner wafted from the kitchen. "Anna?" he called, setting down his toolbox. He'd spent the day fixing a leaky roof at the Henderson place. He found her in the living room, cross-legged on the floor. Paper surrounded her in concentric circles: printouts, newspaper articles, and genealogy charts. Her laptop sat open beside her, the screen bright with images of people in formal dress. Anna looked up, her eyes wide and unfocused. "You're home. What happened here?" Michael knelt beside her, picking up a black and white photograph of a castle. "Did the library explode?" Anna pushed her hair behind her ears with both hands. "I got my DNA results today." Her voice sounded distant, as though she were speaking from underwater. "And?" Michael picked up another paper, something that looked like an official document in a language he didn't recognize. "I'm related to royalty." The words tumbled out in a rush. Not just distantly related, direct line, to a princess who disappeared during World War II. Michael blinked. "Come again?" Anna grabbed her laptop and turned it toward him. "Princess Elisa Corvinia. Look at her eyes, Michael. They're exactly like mine." He studied the photograph, then looked at his wife. The resemblance was striking: the same unusual green eyes, the same distinctive chin. "I've been researching all day." Anna gestured at the papers. The princess disappeared while fleeing the Nazi invasion. Everyone assumed she died, but apparently she made it to America. She must have changed her name, started over. Her voice trailed off. Michael sat back on his heels, trying to absorb it all. "So, you're saying you're what, an actual princess?" "I don't know what I am." Anna's laugh held no humor. "Yesterday I was just Anna, orphan librarian. Today I'm apparently the last descendant of a royal bloodline with a trust fund and a country that still recognizes the family." Michael picked up one of the documents, a printout from the Ancestry website, showing a 98.7% confidence rating. Could it be a mistake? Anna shook her head. "I called their customer service. They said this level of match is extremely rare. They want to do a follow-up test." Michael ran his hand through his hair, feeling dizzy. "And all this time, you thought you came from nowhere." "I spent my whole life wondering where I belonged." Anna's voice cracked. "Now I find out I'm connected to a family with its own coat of arms." She picked up a paper showing an elaborate crest, a lion and an eagle supporting a crown. "How am I supposed to make sense of this?" Michael looked around at the scattered evidence of Anna's extraordinary heritage. Then he looked at his wife, still the same Anna who'd stolen his heart, royal blood or not. He gathered the papers into a neat stack and set them aside. Then he took both her hands in his. "We'll figure it out, step by step. First thing tomorrow, we'll send for that follow-up test. What if it's true?" Her voice trembled. "What does that make me?" "It makes you Anna. The same person you've always been. Michael squeezed her hands, with or without a tiara. She gave a watery laugh. Whatever this means, Michael said, we'll face it together. The whispers started on Tuesday morning when Anna arrived at the library. Mrs. Peterson from the checkout desk huddled with the Historical Society ladies, their voices dropping to silence when Anna walked past. By lunchtime, Anna noticed people stealing glances at her over the tops of their books. On Wednesday, Darla from the Pine Creek Gazette called. Just a few questions about your royal connections, she insisted. Our readers would be fascinated. Anna clutched the phone tighter. I really don't think we'll run it with or without your comments, Anna. Thursday's headline read, Local Librarian Discovers Royal Roots. The article included details Anna had never shared publicly someone had been digging. By Friday, 3 more papers had picked up the story, each headline more sensational than the last. Anna shelved books with shaking hands, trying to ignore the stares. The confirmation test had arrived yesterday, validating everything. There was no more hiding from the truth. Excuse me, a woman Anna had never seen before approached the reference desk. Would you mind signing this for my daughter? She collects autographs. Anna blinked at the newspaper being thrust toward her. I'm not famous. But you're royalty, the woman beamed. Princess Anna. That's not how it works. I'm just, please? The woman pushed a pen forward. To avoid a scene, Anna scribbled her name. Before closing time, 7 more people had asked for signatures. Walking home, Anna noticed Mrs. Tanner watching from her porch. The elderly woman who'd never spared Anna a glance before now waved enthusiastically. Your Highness, she called out. Would you like some lemonade? Anna hurried past, cheeks burning. At the corner market, the owner bowed slightly as she entered. The special tea you like, I've ordered more. He'd never remembered her preferences before. That night, Michael found Anna sitting in the dark. 3 voice messages from TV stations, she said, and someone left flowers on our porch addressed to Her Royal Highness. Michael sat beside her. This will blow over. No, it won't. Anna leaned against him. I've spent my life being invisible. Now I'm the only thing people see, and it's not even me they're looking at. It's some made-up princess. What can I do? Anna closed her eyes. Just be the one person who still sees me. The following morning, Saturday, brought unexpected visitors. Mrs. Jenkins arrived first, hugging Anna fiercely. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I never thought the test would cause this circus. Before Anna could respond, a black car pulled up. A distinguished man in a suit emerged, carrying a leather portfolio. Mrs. Whitmore? I represent the Corvinian Heritage Society. He handed her a card. We'd like to discuss your participation in our upcoming cultural exhibition. Later, after politely sending the man away with promises to consider his offer, Anna collapsed onto the sofa. It's never going to stop, is it? Across town, Charles Whitmore sat alone in his oak-paneled study. The evening paper lay on his desk, delivered by his housekeeper with an unusual comment. You might want to see this, sir. The headline screamed in bold letters, Forgotten heiress in our town. Colonel's rejected daughter-in-law has royal blood. Charles stared at Anna's photograph. The girl he deemed unworthy gazed back at him, her resemblance to the side-by-side historical portrait undeniable. His throat tightened. They'd made him look like a fool, the colonel who disowned his son for marrying beneath him, only to discover the girl outranked them all. His hand trembled as he crushed the newspaper, crumpling Anna's face into a ball. I will not be mocked, he whispered to the empty room. Not by her, not by anyone. The thick cream envelope arrived on a Tuesday, addressed in elegant calligraphy to Lady Anna Whitmore. Gold embossing caught the afternoon light as Anna turned it over in her hands. It's from the Royal Corvinian Embassy, she told Michael, who had just walked through the door. His tie hung loose around his neck after a long day of teaching. Well, open it. Michael set his satchel down and peered over her shoulder. Anna's fingers trembled as she broke the ornate wax seal. The letter inside was handwritten on heavy parchment. They want me to attend the annual Heritage Festival in Corvia next month. Her voice fell to a whisper. All expenses paid. They're saying I'm the last living descendant of Princess Eleanora's line. Michael took the invitation, eyes widening as he scanned it. 3 weeks in Europe, meeting with historians, archivists, and the current royal family? I can't possibly... Anna. Michael knelt beside her chair. This is the chance to learn everything about where you came from, your actual family history. Anna shook her head. I have a job. We have bills. And what about all the attention? It's finally starting to die down around here. The week since the news broke had been difficult. Reporters camping outside their home, strangers calling at all hours. Even the library had become a tourist stop, with people coming just to see the princess who shelves books. They'll hold your job, Michael insisted. Mrs. Peterson already told you that. And we've been saving. Anna placed the invitation on the table. It feels wrong, like I'm pretending to be someone I'm not. But that's just it. You are someone. Michael's eyes shone with conviction. You've spent your whole life wondering where you belong, who your people were. This could answer everything. Later that evening, they sat on their tiny porch swing. The neighborhood had quieted down, families retreating inside for dinner. A gentle breeze carried the scent of Mrs. Wilson's roses from next door. I keep thinking about those foster homes, Anna said quietly. All those years wondering if I had anyone out there who shared my blood. Michael squeezed her hand. And now you know you do. But what if I go and they expect some sophisticated royal? I'm just me. The girl who wears the same 3 sweaters and reads children's books aloud using funny voices? That's exactly who they should meet. Michael's voice grew serious. You don't have to become someone different. Just be the amazing woman you are, the one I married. Anna leaned against him. What about your father? Things have been so tense. If I suddenly jet off to Europe claiming royal connections, Dad made his choice. Michael's jaw tightened. You shouldn't make yours based on his pride. That night, Anna lay awake long after Michael's breathing had deepened into sleep. Moonlight spilled through the curtains, casting gentle shadows across their modest bedroom. She thought about the tiny box in her dresser drawer, the only item she had from her birth parents. A tarnished silver locket with no pictures inside. Could there be portraits waiting for her in Corvia? Family records? Her actual history? But then her eyes traced the familiar outlines of their room, the secondhand furniture they'd chosen together. The quilt Mrs. Jenkins had made for their wedding. The stack of library books on her nightstand. This was real. This was certain. Anna turned onto her side, watching Michael sleep. The choice before her seemed impossible reach for the unknown past that had always eluded her, or hold fast to the simple, loving present she'd worked so hard to build. The following afternoon, Charles Whitmore parked his navy blue pickup across the street from Michael and Anna's house. He'd driven past 3 times before finding the courage to stop. Now he sat with white knuckles gripping the steering wheel, engine off, watching. Anna knelt in the small front yard surrounded by a cluster of neighborhood children. Her honey-brown hair caught the sunlight as she helped them plant something in a wooden box. Charles couldn't hear her words, but he saw how the children leaned toward her, faces upturned like flowers seeking the Sunday. Princess indeed, he muttered. But the bitterness in his voice sounded hollow even to his own ears. A freckle-faced boy of about 7 stumbled, spilling dirt across Anna's lap. Charles tensed, expecting a rebuke. Instead, Anna laughed and brushed the soil away, then whispered something that made the boy beam with relief. The scene stirred something deep within Charles' memories of Michael at that age, of Elizabeth's gentle way with children. She would have adored Anna. One of the little girls draped a dandelion chain over Anna's head like a crown. The children giggled, dancing around her, chanting something that made Anna cover her mouth in laughter. Not a hint of royal arrogance, not a trace of someone putting on airs. Charles swallowed hard against the lump forming in his throat. A boy with a toy truck crashed it into Anna's knee. Rather than brushing him aside, she picked up another truck and joined his game, crawling through the dirt with no concern for her clothes. These were the Wilsons' grandchildren, the same Wilsons who had attended every Rotary dinner, who knew Charles' standing in the community. Yet here was their youngest grandchild, treating the supposed royal like any other grown-up friend. The newspaper clipping Charles had tucked into his breast pocket suddenly felt heavy. He'd read the article so many times he'd memorized it. Local librarian discovers royal heritage. The evidence seemed irrefutable: historical records, DNA matches, genealogists confirming her lineage back to the exiled princess. A car door slammed. Michael emerged from their driveway carrying grocery bags. Charles sank lower in his seat, but his son never looked his way. Instead, Michael called something to Anna, who waved back with soil-stained hands. The couple exchanged a look that twisted Charles's heart, such simple, unguarded love. Michael set down the bags and joined the children's game, pretending to be a monster while they scattered, shrieking with delight. One small girl sought refuge behind Anna, who wrapped her arms protectively around the child. The scene blurred as unexpected moisture gathered in Charles's eyes. This woman his son had married, this orphan he'd rejected, showed more natural grace than half the society ladies Charles had known, more kindness than the bloodlines he'd valued so highly. The dandelion crown slipped, and Anna straightened it with careful fingers, as tenderly as if it were made of gold and rubies. Elizabeth would have been ashamed of me, Charles whispered, his wife's memory washing over him like a tide. The enormity of his mistake threatened to crack his carefully constructed defenses. His chest tightened, and he jammed the key into the ignition. Sentiment, he grumbled, blinking rapidly. Nothing but foolish sentiment. The engine roared to life, louder than necessary. Charles threw the truck into gear and pulled away from the curb with unnecessary force. "I won't be swayed," he muttered as houses blurred past his window. "Not by newspaper stories, not by children's games." But his voice trembled, and the image of Anna's gentle smile remained long after he'd driven away. Charles hadn't planned to attend church that Sunday. Yet at 7:30, he found himself standing in front of his bedroom mirror, knotting his navy tie with practiced precision. He hadn't set foot in Riverside Community Church since the Sunday before Michael announced his engagement. The church bells chimed across town as Charles eased his pickup into the nearly full parking lot. He slipped through the side door just as the final notes of the opening hymn faded. Keeping his head down, he took a seat in the last pew, behind a family with 3 small children. Pastor Jim Matthews stood at the pulpit, silver-haired and familiar. Charles had known the man for 30 years, had served alongside him on the church board. Now he shrank from the pastor's gaze, but Jim merely nodded before opening his Bible. Today's message, Pastor Jim's voice carried clearly through the sanctuary, comes from Matthew, chapter 18. The parable of the unforgiving servant. Charles shifted uncomfortably. Of all the Sundays to return, a servant owed his master 10,000 talents, an impossible sum. When he couldn't pay, the master took pity and canceled the debt entirely. A child in front of Charles dropped a toy. He handed it back, receiving a shy smile from the mother. But then, Pastor Jim continued, this same servant found a fellow servant who owed him 100 denarii, a mere fraction of his forgiven debt. Instead of showing the same mercy he'd received, he had the man thrown into prison. Charles stared at the stained glass window depicting the prodigal son's return. Elizabeth had always loved that window. Pride, Pastor Jim's voice dropped lower, is the enemy of forgiveness. Pride tells us we're justified in holding grudges. Pride whispers that we're better than others. But humility? He paused, looking across the congregation. Humility reminds us that we've all been forgiven debts we could never repay. Charles's throat tightened. Elizabeth had said something similar once, hadn't she? After their argument about Michael's college choice. Darling, she'd written in her journal, your pride will rob you of joy if you let it. The master in this parable asks a powerful question. Pastor Jim leaned forward. Shouldn't you have had mercy on your fellow servant just as I had on you? Brothers and sisters, who in your life needs the mercy you've already received? Michael's face flashed in Charles's mind, followed by Anna's Anna with her gentle laugh and dandelion crown. After the service, Charles slipped out before anyone could engage him in conversation. The drive home passed in a blur, his mind racing with unwelcome thoughts. In his driveway, he sat with the engine idling. Elizabeth had kept journals for years, dozens of leather-bound books filled with her thoughts, prayers, and gentle wisdom. After her death 3 years ago, he'd packed them away, unable to bear her voice without her presence. Now he needed that voice more than anything. The attic stairs creaked under his weight as Charles climbed toward the cedar chest where he'd stored her things. Dust motes danced in the beams of light streaming through the small window. The chest's hinges groaned as he lifted the lid, releasing the faint scent of Elizabeth's lavender sachets. There they were, a neat row of journals spanning their 42 years together. Charles selected one with a worn blue cover from the period just after Michael's 16th birthday. Downstairs in his study, he settled into his armchair and opened to a page marked with a faded ribbon. Elizabeth's elegant handwriting filled the page. Charles and Michael argued again today. My stubborn men, so alike yet unable to see it. I reminded Charles that grace isn't earned, it's given freely, and that's what makes it powerful. The hardest hearts need grace the most, and sometimes God uses the most unexpected people to teach us how to soften. Charles touched the words, tracing her handwriting with a trembling finger. Tears welled in his eyes, blurring the page. Elizabeth, he whispered, I've made such a mess of things. 2 weeks later, Main Street transformed for the annual Heritage Festival. Colorful banners stretched between lampposts, and folding chairs lined the town square where a wooden stage had been erected. The air smelled of funnel cakes and barbecue smoke. Anna smoothed her simple blue dress for the 10th time. I feel ridiculous, she whispered to Michael as they approached the festival. I'm still the same person I was before that test. Michael squeezed her hand. That's why everyone loves you. Fame hasn't changed your heart one bit. Mayor Wilson spotted them and hurried over, his round face flushed with excitement. There she is, our town celebrity. He pumped Anna's hand. We've got you scheduled to speak at 2 o'clock right after the children's choir. Anna's stomach fluttered. Just a few words, right? Of course, of course. Just share a little about your discovery and what it means to you. People are fascinated. As they wandered through the festival, townspeople stopped Anna every few steps. Mrs. Cooper from the bakery pressed a free apple turnover into her hands. On the house for our royal visitor, the hardware store owner's wife asked for a photo to show my sister in Ohio. I never expected this, Anna murmured as they found seats for the opening ceremony. I've lived here 3 years, and half these people never even noticed me before. Michael's jaw tightened slightly. Dad would say that's how the world works. Titles matter to people. Not to us, though. She laid her head on his shoulder. Right? Never. He kissed her forehead as the children's choir took the stage. At 2 o'clock, Mayor Wilson called Anna to the stage. The crowd's applause washed over her as she climbed the steps. Familiar faces beamed up at her co-workers from the library, Michael's students, neighbors, and churchgoers. Thank you all, she began, her voice surprisingly steady. This past month has been quite the whirlwind. As most of you know, I grew up in foster care, never knowing my birth family. She paused, finding Michael's encouraging smile in the crowd. Finding out about my heritage was shocking, but it hasn't changed who I am inside. The audience listened attentively as Anna continued. What matters isn't the royal connection, but the reminder that we all have worth beyond what we can see. Each of us has a story, generations of love and struggle that made us who we are today. Her voice grew stronger. I'm still Anna, just Anna who loves books, children, and this wonderful community that's become my true home. The crowd erupted in applause as she finished. Mayor Wilson returned to the microphone, beaming. Let's hear it again for our very own Anna Whitmore. As the clapping continued, movement near the back of the crowd caught Anna's eye. Her heart nearly stopped. Charles Whitmore, straight-backed and solemn in his Sunday suit, made his way deliberately through the parting crowd. Whispers rippled through the audience. Michael stood frozen, his expression a mixture of hope and apprehension. Time seemed to slow as Charles climbed the steps to the stage. His face was unreadable as he approached Anna. The entire festival fell silent. Miss Anna, he said, his voice carrying across the hushed crowd. He extended his hand formally. Anna's fingers trembled as she placed her hand in his weathered palm. Mrs. Whitmore, he corrected himself, loud enough for everyone to hear. My son's wife, my daughter-in-law. Their handshake lingered as tears spilled down Anna's cheeks. She couldn't speak, couldn't move. In Charles's eyes, she saw something she'd never expected: respect, and perhaps the faintest glimmer of acceptance. The crowd's thunderous applause broke the spell. Anna's heart swelled with hope so intense it felt almost painful. After months of rejection, this simple public acknowledgement meant more than any royal connection ever could. The little yellow house glowed warmly against the darkening sky. Anna bustled around the kitchen, checking the roast chicken for the 3rd time, while Michael set the table with their mismatched plates. Do you think he'll actually come? Anna asked, smoothing the wrinkles from the tablecloth. Michael placed the last fork down. I honestly don't know. After today, anything seems possible. The doorbell rang, and they both froze. Michael squeezed Anna's hand before walking to the door. When he opened it, Charles stood on the porch, clutching a small paper bag. I brought wine, he said stiffly, holding out the bag. Nothing fancy. Thank you, Dad. Please come in. Michael stepped aside, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. Charles hesitated at the threshold, taking in the modest living room with its second-hand furniture and handmade curtains. The house smelled of rosemary and fresh bread. Anna appeared in the kitchen doorway, wiping her hands on her apron. Dinner's almost ready. Would you like to sit down? The three moved awkwardly to the table. Charles pulled out his chair with military precision, his back ramrod straight. Michael poured the wine into 3 mismatched glasses, while Anna brought the food. I hope you like chicken, she said, setting the platter down. It was my foster mother's recipe. Charles nodded. Looks fine. The clinking of silverware filled the silence as they began eating. Michael cleared his throat twice before asking, How's the garden doing this year? Tomatoes came in well. Too many for just me. More silence. Anna passed the green beans. These are from Mrs. Peterson next door. She always gives us extra. Charles took some, then said unexpectedly, Your mother loved green beans. Grew them every summer. Michael's fork paused midway to his mouth. I remember. She'd make us snap them on the porch. Every Sunday afternoon. Charles's voice softened. Said it was her thinking time. Something in the air changed. The rigid tension began to dissolve as Michael shared a memory of his mother's famous bean casserole disaster. And to Anna's surprise, Charles actually chuckled. Burned it black as coal, he confirmed. set off every alarm in the house. Anna relaxed enough to tell them about her first cooking attempt at age 12 cookies so hard they could have been used as doorstops. Charles's laugh was rusty but real. "Not as bad as Michael's first pancakes," he said. "Looked like rubber frisbees." "Hey," Michael protested, but he was grinning. By dessert, Anna's apple crisp, the conversation flowed more naturally. Charles even asked about Anna's work at the library, listening intently as she described her children's reading program. When it was time to leave, Charles stood at the door. The awkwardness returned briefly, but Anna stepped forward and did something she'd never dared before she gave him a quick, light hug. "Thank you for coming," she said simply. Charles stiffened, then patted her shoulder once. Dinner was good. He looked at Michael. "You've made a nice home here." The words weren't much, but Michael recognized the concession they represented. "Thanks, Dad." Charles nodded and walked to his car. As he pulled away, he lifted his hand in a small wave. Back at his large, empty house, Charles hung his jacket in the closet. A sense of lightness he hadn't felt in years lingered from the evening. Their little home had been full of something his grand house lacked. As he walked toward his study, a sudden crushing pain seized his chest. His breath caught as fire seemed to spread through his ribs. The room tilted sideways as he clutched at the wall, knocking a framed photo to the floor. Charles collapsed beside it, the image of his late wife's face, the last thing he saw before darkness claimed him. The hospital corridors blurred as Michael and Anna raced toward the emergency room. The call had come just after midnight. A neighbor had found Charles collapsed on his kitchen floor after hearing a crash through the open window. "Family of Charles Whitmore?" A doctor in rumpled scrubs looked up from her clipboard. "That's us." Michael's voice cracked. "I'm his son. How is he?" "He's stabilized. Your father suffered a moderate stroke. We administered medication quickly, which helped minimize the damage, but he's experiencing some left side weakness and difficulty speaking." Anna gripped Michael's hand as the doctor continued explaining about brain function and recovery. The medical terms washed over them in waves of fear and hope. "Can we see him?" Anna finally asked. The doctor nodded. "Briefly. He's conscious but tired. Room 312. Charles looked diminished against the white sheets, his commanding presence reduced by tubes and monitors. His weathered face seemed to have aged 10 years overnight. When he saw them enter, something flickered in his eyes, recognition mixed with shame. "Dad?" Michael approached the bed slowly. "We came as soon as we heard." Charles tried to speak, but the words came out slurred. Frustration crossed his face as he struggled to form a simple sentence. "Don't push yourself," Anna said gently. "The doctor said your speech will improve with therapy." Charles made a dismissive gesture with his right hand. His left lay motionless on the blanket. He tried again, forcing out a gravelly, "Shouldn't have come." "Of course we came," Michael said firmly. "You're my father." A nurse entered to check vital signs, explaining that Charles needed rest. "You can come back in the morning. Visiting hours start at 9. Through the night, they dozed fitfully in the waiting room chairs. At dawn, Anna found coffee while Michael called the school where he taught to arrange a substitute. When they returned to Charles's room in the morning, a physical therapist was helping him sit up. The effort clearly exhausted him, but the stubborn set of his jaw was pure Charles Whitmore. "The doctor says you can come home in a few days," Michael said when they were alone. "We've already made up the guest room for you." Charles's eyes widened in alarm. He shook his head forcefully. "It's all arranged, Dad. You'll need help during recovery." "No. Charity," Charles managed to say, each word a battle. Anna stepped forward. "It's not charity, it's family. That's what yesterday was about, wasn't it? A new beginning?" For a moment, Charles's expression softened. Then, as if remembering something painful, his face clouded. His right hand clenched the blanket. "I thought God was punishing me." The words came slowly. Each one fought for and won. "For pride. For rejecting you." "That's not how it works," Anna said softly. "God doesn't punish with illness." Charles turned his face toward the window, away from them. "Too late," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Too late for forgiveness." Michael reached for his father's hand. "It's never too late, Dad." But Charles kept his gaze fixed on the window, where morning light cast long shadows across the room. His shoulders shook slightly, though no sound came from him. When a tear slid down his weathered cheek, he made no move to wipe it away. "Too late," he repeated, more to himself than to them. His hand went limp in Michael's grasp as exhaustion pulled him toward sleep. Anna and Michael exchanged a look of shared determination. This was a setback, not an ending. The journey toward healing had only just begun. Anna came every afternoon like clockwork, Bible in hand, her footsteps light against the sterile hospital floor. Charles remained unmoved, his face turned toward the window each time she entered. "Good afternoon," she said, settling into the chair beside his bed. The spring sunshine streamed through the blinds, painting stripes across the blanket. Charles grunted, his gaze fixed on the bird feeder outside. The doctors had told them that engaging his mind was important for recovery, but he seemed determined to resist. "I thought I'd read to you today," Anna said, opening her Bible to a page marked with a ribbon. "Don't need preaching." His words came out slurred but clearer than before. The speech therapy was helping, though he'd never admit it. Anna smiled gently. "Not preaching, just reading, something to pass the time." She began with Psalms, her voice steady and calm. Charles made a show of ignoring her, but she noticed his breathing change, slowing to match the rhythm of her words. Each day she returned, and each day his protest grew weaker. By the fifth visit, he no longer objected aloud, though his posture remained rigid, unwelcoming. On the seventh day, Anna brought flowers, simple daisies in a small vase. "The neighbor children picked these for you," she said, placing them on his nightstand. "They miss seeing you drive by." Something flickered across Charles's face, surprised perhaps that anyone would notice his absence. "Thought everyone glad the old grouch gone," he muttered. Anna touched his hand briefly. "You'd be surprised how many people ask about you." That afternoon, she read from Ecclesiastes. Charles closed his eyes, but she noticed his right hand tapping gently against the blanket, following the cadence of her words. The next Monday, Anna arrived to find Charles sitting up, attempting to feed himself lunch. Most of the soup had spilled on his hospital gown, and frustration lined his face. Without comment, she took the spoon and helped him, then read from Proverbs while he rested. "Why do you bother?" he asked suddenly, interrupting her mid-verse. "I was terrible to you." Anna closed the Bible, her finger marking her place. "Because that's what family does. We show up." Charles frowned. "Not family. Just old fool. Who hurt you?" "You're Michael's father," she said simply. "That makes you family to me." Days passed. Charles began physical therapy, struggling through exercises that left him exhausted but determined. Anna read through Job, Isaiah, and Ruth, her voice a steady companion through his pain and frustration. On a quiet Thursday evening, when the hospital hallways had grown still, Anna opened to Luke, chapter 15. Charles appeared to be dozing, his breathing deep and even. Perfect time for the story of the prodigal son, she thought. "There was a man who had 2 sons, she began softly. Though his eyes remained closed, Charles was fully awake. The familiar parable washed over him. The son who demanded his inheritance early, who squandered it and returned home in shame. The father who ran to meet him, who celebrated his return. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." Anna's voice caught slightly on the words. In the dim light, she didn't notice that Charles had opened his eyes just enough to watch her read. Didn't see how his weathered face softened at her expression of complete concentration. As she closed the Bible, a single tear escaped, trailing down Charles's cheek and disappearing into the pillow. He closed his eyes quickly, but the wetness remained, silent testimony to a heart beginning, ever so slightly, to thaw. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Charles's hospital room as Anna settled into her usual chair. Today, she hadn't brought her Bible. "I thought we might just talk today," she said, noticing how Charles's eyes followed her movements. Something had shifted between them since she'd read the prodigal son story. He no longer turned away when she entered. Charles adjusted himself against his pillows, his movements slow but deliberate. "About what?" Anna smoothed her skirt over her knees. "Maybe about me? You never really asked before everything happened?" A flicker of shame crossed Charles's face. He cleared his throat. "Where did you grow up?" "Everywhere and nowhere," Anna said with a small smile. "I was in 12 different homes before I turned 18. Charles's eyebrows rose. 12? Anna nodded. "The first family kept me until I was 4. I don't remember them much. Just a yellow kitchen and a dog named Buster." She twisted her wedding ring, a simple gold band that caught the sunlight. Most placements lasted less than a year. "Why?" The question came out sharper than Charles intended. "Sometimes the foster parents changed their minds about having children. Sometimes they moved or had financial troubles." Anna shrugged. "A few times they were just collecting the check." Charles's jaw tightened. "That's wrong." "It was hard," Anna admitted. "Every time I unpacked my little suitcase, I wondered how long before I'd pack it again. The worst part was feeling like I was just passing through everyone's life, never really belonging." She told him about the Christmas when she was 8, when her foster mother forgot to include her in the family gift exchange. about the school plays where she stood on stage, scanning the audience for a face that never appeared, about eating lunch alone because she was the foster kid. How did you survive that? Charles's voice was rough with emotion. Mrs. Jenkins, my last foster mother, gave me a Bible when I was 15. She was the first one who treated me like I mattered. Anna's eyes grew distant with memory. There's a verse in Psalms. Though my father and mother forsake me, the Lord will receive me. That became my anchor. Charles thought of his own son, of the love he'd withheld out of pride, of this gentle woman who had every reason to be bitter but somehow wasn't. Mrs. Jenkins taught me that family isn't just blood, Anna continued. It's choice. It's showing up for each other, even when it's hard. She smiled softly, especially when it's hard. Charles stared at his hands, once strong enough to command troops, now weakened by stroke. He thought of his late wife Elizabeth, who had possessed the same quiet strength as Anna, who had forgiven his countless failings. Elizabeth would have loved you, he said suddenly. Anna's eyes widened in surprise. She always wanted a daughter. Charles's voice grew unsteady. She would have taught you to garden, make her famous apple pie. I would have liked that, Anna whispered. Charles saw something in Anna's expression that he'd missed before, a longing that matched his own. Both orphaned in different ways. She by circumstance, he by his own stubbornness. Memories flooded back. Elizabeth's patient smile when he was being difficult, her unwavering kindness to everyone she met, the way she'd loved Michael unconditionally, balancing Charles's strict nature. With effort, Charles reached for Anna's hand. His fingers trembled as they closed around hers. For the first time, he squeezed gently, intentionally. Daughter. The word escaped him, barely audible, but unmistakable. The call came just after midnight. Michael fumbled for his phone in the darkness, Anna stirring beside him. Hello, he mumbled, then sat bolt upright. We'll be right there. What is it? Anna asked, already reaching for her clothes. Dad, the nurse says he's asking for us. They drove through empty streets, the hospital's fluorescent glow a beacon in the night. When they reached Charles's room, they found him awake, propped against his pillows, looking smaller than Michael had ever seen him. You came, Charles said, his voice a fragile thread. Of course we did. Michael pulled 2 chairs close to the bed. Anna sat beside him, her face etched with concern. Charles's hand trembled as he reached for the water glass. Michael helped him take a sip, noting how his father's fingers felt like dry paper against his own. I need to say things, Charles began, each word a careful effort, while I still can. Dad, you're going to be fine. Michael started, but Charles shook his head. Please, listen. The room fell silent except for the steady beep of monitors. Outside, rain began to tap against the window, a gentle percussion to accompany Charles's halting words. I've been so proud, too proud. He drew a shaky breath. All my life, reputation, status, I thought they mattered. Anna reached across to touch his arm, but remained silent, giving him space to continue. When you chose her, Charles looked at Michael, then Anna. I was afraid, not of her, of being wrong, of losing control. His voice cracked. I was so angry when the test came back. Not at you, at myself. Tears gathered in the corners of his eyes. I wasted so much time, being right, being respected. None of it matters now. The rain fell harder, streaming down the window pane like the tears Charles no longer tried to hide. I'm afraid, he whispered, the confession wrenched from somewhere deep. Afraid of dying, alone, afraid it's too late. His fingers clutched at the blanket. I don't deserve forgiveness. Michael's throat tightened. Never had he seen his father so vulnerable, so stripped of pretense. The stern colonel, the rigid businessman, gone. In their place sat only a frightened old man, confronting his mortality and mistakes. All these years, Charles continued, I thought I was, protecting our family name, but I was, destroying my family. He looked at Anna, his eyes pleading. I'm sorry, for everything. The confession hung in the air, raw and real. Anna was the first to move, taking Charles's hand between both of hers. I forgive you, she said simply. Michael moved to the edge of the bed, his own eyes damp. He placed his hand over his father's and Anna's, completing the circle. You've always been my father, he said, his voice steady despite the emotion behind it. That never changed. Not when you yelled at the rehearsal dinner. Not when you missed our wedding. Not when you turned away from us. None of it changed who you are to me. Charles's shoulders shook with silent sobs. Anna leaned closer, her voice gentle but firm. And you've always had a daughter, whether you wanted one or not. A small smile softened her words. Family isn't about deserving, it's about belonging. Outside, the rain began to ease, and in the quiet that followed, something long broken began, at last, to heal. 3 days later, Michael eased the car into their driveway with Charles in the passenger seat, Anna following in Charles's car. The short trip from the hospital had exhausted the older man, though he tried not to show it. Here we are, Michael said, turning off the engine. Home sweet home. Charles stared at the modest house with its small front porch and neatly trimmed hedges. Not his grand colonial with its manicured lawn and stone pillars, but somehow more inviting than his own home had felt in years. You don't have to do this, he said, his voice still weak. I can manage at my place. Not according to your doctor. Michael came around and opened the door. Besides, we want you here. Anna joined them, carrying Charles's small suitcase. The guest room is all ready. It took both of them to help Charles up the 3 porch steps. His legs, once strong enough to march miles with a full pack, now trembled beneath him. The stroke had stolen more than just his words. Inside, the house smelled of fresh paint and something baking. Charles noticed the rearranged furniture, the cleared pathway for easier walking, the new handrails installed in the hallway. You've gone to a lot of trouble, he said. Family's worth the trouble, Anna replied, leading him toward the back of the house. The spare bedroom had been transformed. His favorite reading chair from home sat by the window. On the nightstand, a framed photo of his late wife smiled at him. The bed had been lowered for easier access, with grab bars discreetly installed. We brought some things from your house, Michael explained, to make it feel more familiar. Charles sank onto the edge of the bed, overcome. These were the same people he'd rejected, now opening their home to him without hesitation. The weight of his own bitterness seemed heavier than ever against their kindness. I don't understand why you're doing all this, he admitted. Anna sat beside him. Because forgiveness isn't just words, Mr. Whitmore. It's actions. Charles, he corrected. Please call me Charles. Over the next few days, they settled into a careful routine. Michael helped his father with morning exercises before leaving for work. Anna, who had taken leave from the library, spent her days keeping Charles company, reading to him or simply sitting in comfortable silence. Sometimes he caught her watching him with curious eyes, as if trying to see the connections between father and son. Other times, she shared stories of her childhood not to guilt him, but to help him understand her. On the 4th evening, Anna prepared a special dinner. The small dining table was set with care, not the fine china Charles was accustomed to, but simple plates arranged with obvious thought. Michael helped Charles to his seat at the head of the table. The savory smell of pot roast filled the room, reminding him of Sunday dinners long ago when his wife was still alive. Anna brought the food to the table, serving Charles first before taking her seat. Michael reached for her hand, then extended his other hand toward his father. Charles hesitated, then took it. Anna completed the circle, offering her free hand to Charles. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Charles, to everyone's surprise, including his own, bowed his head. The words came slowly, rusty with disuse. Thank you, Lord, for this food, he began, his voice growing steadier. For this home, for second chances, and most of all, for family. Amen. When he looked up, both Michael and Anna were watching him with shining eyes. Amen, they echoed softly. Sunday morning dawned bright and clear. Charles woke early, his body aching but his mind clearer than it had been in weeks. He dressed with care in his Sunday best, struggling with buttons that his clumsy fingers now found challenging. Are you sure about this? Michael asked, helping his father with his tie. Nobody expects you to push yourself. Charles straightened his shoulders. I've missed enough Sundays. Some things can't wait any longer. The small church had stood at the center of town for over a century. Charles had attended services there his entire life, sitting in the same pew his parents had occupied before him. As Michael helped him up the steps, a hush fell over the gathering crowd. Pastor Wilson hurried forward. Colonel Whitmore, what a blessing to see you! Whispers rippled through the congregation as Michael guided his father down the aisle. Anna followed behind, her simple floral dress a stark contrast to the expensive clothes Charles had once insisted defined a person's worth. They settled into the 3rd row, not Charles's usual spot at the back. He wanted to be seen today. The service proceeded with familiar hymns and prayers. Charles's voice, though weaker than before, joined in when he could. During announcements, several church members welcomed him back with warm smiles. When the time came for testimonies, Pastor Wilson opened the floor. Does anyone have something they'd like to share with the congregation today? Charles gripped Michael's arm. Help me up. Dad, are you sure? Please. Michael supported his father as he rose shakily to his feet. The church went silent. "I have something to say," Charles announced, his voice unsteady but determined. "For too long I've put pride before love. I rejected my son for marrying beneath what I thought was our station. I was wrong." He turned toward Anna, who watched him with wide eyes. "This woman, this kind, faithful woman, is not just my son's wife. She is my daughter, my family." His voice broke. "And I thank God every day that he's given me the chance to know her." Anna's eyes filled with tears as Charles extended his hand to her. She rose and stepped toward him. "I'm proud to call you my daughter," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. The church erupted in applause as Charles opened his arms. Anna stepped into his embrace, her tears flowing freely now. Over her shoulder, Charles saw many in the congregation wiping their eyes, including several of his oldest friends. In that moment, surrounded by witness and grace, Charles finally understood what real worth looked like. The sun rose with a soft glow to paint the town with shades of gentle warmth. On Sunday morning, the gentle clatter of the breakfast dishes gave way to an unusual ritual. Charles glanced at the clock, then toward the door, signs of anticipation hovering around him like birds on the branch. Determined, he looked at Michael. "I want to go to church today," he declared, a firm edge beneath the weariness. "It's time." Michael nodded, a silent agreement to this new stride in their journey. Anna dressed with purpose, her eyes conveying support and a speck of unease about this. The first public outing since the reconciliation began. With Michael's steady arm supporting him, Charles walked toward the church entrance. The path whispered secrets of memories long past, welcoming the steps of a man daring to reclaim moments almost lost. The church, a haven with wooden pews polished by countless Sundays, held its familiar scent of old wood and hymnal pages, air filled with whispers of hope. As they stepped through the double doors, those gathered turned slowly, collective surprise rippling through the congregation. Charles, once the cornerstone of community respect, had become a recluse, a figure of rumored. The autumn morning painted golden streaks across the kitchen as Anna set down a plate of blueberry pancakes in front of Charles. 3 months had passed since his stroke, and though his movements remained slower than before, his spirit had brightened considerably. Michael poured coffee for them all, except for Anna, who opted for orange juice instead. Anna and Michael exchanged quick glances across the table. They had planned this moment carefully, waiting until Charles seemed strong enough for big news. "These pancakes are delicious," Charles said, cutting another piece with his fork. "What's the occasion?" Anna reached for Michael's hand under the table and squeezed it. "Well, there is something special about today." Her voice trembled slightly. Michael nodded encouragingly. "Go ahead, tell him." Anna took a deep breath. "Charles, Michael, and I." She paused, her eyes filling with happy tears. "We're going to have a baby. You're going to be a grandfather." Charles's fork clattered against his plate. He stared at them, his weathered face frozen in surprise. "A baby?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. "My Michael's baby?" Michael nodded. "Due in early spring, we just found out for certain last week." Charles pushed back from the table and stood, his legs unsteady. For a terrifying moment, Anna feared the news had been too much for his heart. But then she saw his face, tears welling in his eyes, his lips trembling not with pain but with overwhelming emotion. "A Whitmore baby," he murmured, moving slowly around the table toward Anna. He knelt beside her chair with difficulty, his arthritic joints protesting. Anna turned to face him, concerned by his struggle. "Please, you don't need to." "I do," Charles insisted, taking her hand in both of his. Tears spilled freely down his cheeks now, dripping onto their joined hands. "Anna, my daughter." He pressed his lips to her hand in a gesture of reverence that made Anna's own tears flow. His voice, though weak, carried the weight of a solemn vow. "I'll live to hold that baby. God as my witness, I'll be there." The rocking chair creaked gently as Charles ran his hand over the polished oak armrest. His eyes squinted critically at the craftsmanship while the furniture store owner waited patiently. "What do you think?" Charles asked, looking up at Anna, whose baby bump had grown noticeably in the past 2 months. Anna lowered herself carefully into the chair, feeling its gentle sway. "It's perfect. Not too hard on your back?" Charles fussed, adjusting a small cushion behind her. "A mother needs proper support during those late-night feedings." Anna smiled, touched by his concern. "You seem to know a lot about this. Margaret, your mother-in-law, she had her preferences." His voice softened at the memory. "Nothing was ever quite right until we found a chair like this one." Later that week, Charles sat at the workbench in Michael and Anna's garage, carefully sanding the edges of what would become a cradle. Wood chips dusted his pants and the concrete floor as he meticulously shaped each curve. Though his hands weren't as steady as they once were, determination made up for what age had taken. Michael stopped by, watching his father work. Need any help? Charles shook his head. Did this for you too. Some things a grandfather should do himself. He blew sawdust from a freshly sanded edge. Your mother kept this cradle for years, hoping you'd use it someday for your children. What happened to it? Michael asked. Charles's hand stilled. I gave it away after our fight. Another regret to add to my collection. He looked up, eyes clear and determined. But this one will be better. I'm putting my heart into every inch. On Sunday afternoons, Charles took to sitting with Anna on the porch swing. While Michael worked in the yard, Charles would tell tales of his military days, of meeting Margaret, of Michael as a stubborn, bright-eyed boy. Did you know your father once set up a lemonade stand outside the officers' club? Charles chuckled, watching Michael deadhead roses nearby. 7 years old, charging $1 a cup to men who made military decisions. Anna laughed, resting her hand on her growing belly. Was he always so enterprising? Always knew his worth, Charles nodded. Got that from his mother. He hesitated, then placed his weathered hand gently beside Anna's on her stomach. The baby moved. She does that when she hears your voice, Anna said softly. She? Charles's eyes widened. A granddaughter? Anna nodded. We found out yesterday. That evening, as darkness fell, Charles excused himself early. In the privacy of his bedroom, once the guest room, but now undeniably, he eased himself onto his knees beside the bed. The position hurt his joints, but some prayers, he believed, required proper reverence. Lord, he whispered, clasping his hands tightly, I don't deserve this second chance. Not after how I treated my son. Not after how I judged Anna before knowing her heart. His voice caught. But you've given me a family again, a granddaughter coming, time I never thought I'd have. Tears slipped down his weathered cheeks, dropping onto the bedspread. Thank you for this mercy, for this chance to be the man my family needs, the father I failed to be, the grandfather I never thought I'd become. His shoulders shook slightly. I won't waste this gift. Help me love them better than I did before. Help me love them the way you love us all. The wind howled like a wild animal, rattling windows and throwing snow against the small house. Inside, Anna gripped the kitchen counter, her face contorted in pain. Michael, she called, her voice tight. I think it's time. Michael dropped the mug he was drying, barely noticing as it clattered across the floor. He rushed to her side, his heart pounding. How far apart are the contractions? About 5 minutes now. Anna breathed deeply as the pain subsided. And my water broke while I was in the bathroom. Michael glanced anxiously at the window, where snow whipped past in white sheets. We need to go now, before the roads get worse. Charles appeared in the doorway, already bundled in his coat. I've started the car. Engine needs to warm up in this cold. His face was calm, but his eyes betrayed his worry. The drive to the hospital was treacherous. Michael gripped the steering wheel with white knuckles, peering through the windshield wipers that fought a losing battle against the snow. Anna breathed through contractions in the passenger seat, while Charles sat behind her, his hand on her shoulder, murmuring reassurances. Almost there, Charles said, as the hospital lights appeared through the blizzard. You're doing wonderfully, Anna. The emergency entrance was a flurry of activity, as nurses helped Anna into a wheelchair. Michael kissed her forehead before they wheeled her away. I'll be right there, he promised, squeezing her hand. Charles stood in the waiting room, snowflakes melting on his coat. You go with her, son. I'll wait here. Dad, you should come too. No. Charles shook his head. This moment is for you two. Besides, he added with a gentle smile, someone needs to pray. Hours crawled by. Charles paced the waiting room, stopping occasionally to stare out at the storm. He hadn't been this afraid since his army days. Every so often, Michael would appear with brief updates, his face a mixture of excitement and worry, before disappearing again. She's doing great, he'd say. Doctor says everything's normal. Charles nodded each time, trying to look confident. When Michael was gone, he lowered himself into a chair, joints aching from tension, and bowed his head. Lord, he whispered, protect them, Anna and the baby. Give them strength. The storm grew wilder outside, but inside Charles found a strange peace. He remembered Margaret's labor with Michael, how terrified he'd been then too, how beautiful it had been when it was over. Just before dawn, as the storm began to quiet, Michael burst into the waiting room, tears streaming down his face. Dad! His voice broke with joy. Come meet your granddaughter. The hospital room was warm and quiet. Anna lay propped against pillows, her face exhausted but radiant. In her arms, wrapped in a pink blanket, was a tiny bundle. Charles? Anna smiled up at him. Come see her. Charles approached cautiously, as if walking on holy ground. The baby's face was small and perfect, with a dusting of dark hair like Michael's. Would you like to hold her? Anna asked. Charles hesitated, suddenly aware of his age-spotted hands. I might not remember how. It's not something you forget, Michael said, carefully lifting his daughter and placing her in Charles's arms. The baby's weight was almost nothing, yet Charles felt anchored by it. His hands trembled as he cradled her close, studying her tiny features. All the years of pride and stubbornness, all the wasted time, none of it mattered now. Hello, little one, he whispered, his voice thick. A tear splashed onto the blanket. This is our true legacy, not name or status or wealth. He looked up at Michael and Anna, his heart too full for proper words. This love, this family, this is what matters. Months later, the family gathered at the Whitmore farm for a spring picnic. Laughter and children's voices filled the air as neighbors from all around town spread blankets across the sprawling lawn. The old apple trees had burst into pink blossoms, scattering petals like confetti whenever the breeze stirred. Charles sat in his favorite wicker chair on the porch, little Elizabeth cradled in his arms. At 4 months old, she had her mother's eyes and her father's curious nature. Her tiny fingers wrapped around his thumb with surprising strength. Look at that grip, he murmured. Going to be strong like her grandmother. From the lawn below, Anna looked up, her face glowing. She stood among a circle of the community children who had insisted she join their game. Their simple joy had become one of her greatest pleasures since becoming a mother. Your turn, Miss Anna, a little boy called, tossing her a ball. Anna caught it with a laugh. I'm not very good at this. You don't have to be good, a small girl with pigtails replied wisely. You just have to try. Michael approached the porch with 2 glasses of lemonade, handing one to his father. He gazed at his wife playing with the neighborhood children, then at his daughter nestled in Charles's arms. Never thought I'd see this day, he said softly. Charles nodded, understanding all the unspoken meaning in those words. I wasted too much time on foolish pride. What matters is you're here now. Michael settled into the chair beside him. Elizabeth won't remember a time without her grandfather. Across the lawn, Mrs. Jenkins, Anna's foster mother, chatted with Pastor Williams beneath a maple tree. Neighbors who had witnessed the family's painful separation and joyful reunion moved between tables laden with potluck dishes. Everyone had brought something to share. No one minded that some offerings came on fine china while others arrived in paper bags. The afternoon sun bathed everything in golden light. Elizabeth cooed and reached toward a butterfly that fluttered past the porch. Your mother would have loved today, Charles said, his voice gruff with emotion. She always wanted the farm filled with family. Michael smiled. She's here in her way. In the flowers she planted, the recipes everyone's enjoying. Elizabeth began to fuss, and Charles expertly adjusted her position. Anna has her gentleness. I see Margaret in her every day. Anna broke away from the children's game and climbed the porch steps, breathless and laughing. Your daughter is demanding my attention, she said, reaching for Elizabeth. As she took the baby, Charles caught her hand. Our daughter, he corrected gently, and our granddaughter. The simple words hung in the air between them, more precious than any royal title or heritage. Anna's eyes filled with tears. I never needed to be anything special, you know. Just belonged. You are special, Charles replied, not because of bloodlines or DNA tests, because of who you are. Michael wrapped his arm around Anna's waist as she cradled their daughter. Below them, the community children called for Anna to return to their game. Go on, Charles urged with a smile. Elizabeth and I will watch from here. As Anna rejoined the children, their laughter floated up like music. Charles looked at his son standing beside him, at his daughter-in-law's joyful face, at the baby who carried their shared future. This, he said quietly, is what matters in the end. Not who we were born to be, but who we choose to become, and who we choose to love. Michael squeezed his father's shoulder, words unnecessary between them. Around them, the farm bloomed with new life and second chances. If you enjoyed the story of Charles Whitmore, I handpicked this next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.